So I'd also like to welcome everyone back to our second session on Lojong and how it can make meaning in your life, as well as help you prepare for the big transition of death. And so we're going to start again with our motivation. And I'd like to thank Snehi for hosting this evening and all the people with Shanti Deva Center that are making this teaching possible and all that they do for the center as well. So as we start to go into our Refuge bodhichitta prayer, I'd just like you to take a moment, if you'd like to just close your eyes for a moment. Reflect again on how your day has gone and what perhaps was your motivation earlier in the day or when you woke up, perhaps a time you started to practice. And how the day went based on that motivation. So we're really talking about an intention for the day, but we forget that intention pretty quickly after setting it. And the day sweeps over us, full of its distractions. So here's a time we come back to that motivation. How are my heart and mind right now directed? That's what motivation's about. And in this tradition, as most of you know, the motivation is completely enmeshed with the Buddhist principle of bodhichitta, the enlightened attitude. Bodhichitta. So a Sanskrit term, and again, as Lama Yeshe would call it, totality heart. So having your heart fully open, and this is the premise of Tibetan Buddhism, is I want to continue to open my heart in the most compassionate way possible to consider how I can benefit all living beings. But what I start to be aware of in life is I'm limited in doing that. As a human being, we have human nature, not Buddha nature. Human nature is limited, it is flawed. But Buddha nature is perfect, and that's where we're headed on this path. And if I can fully understand and manifest my Buddha nature, okay, and become a Buddha, a fully awakened being, then I have every capacity to benefit all living beings. Then I can help everybody wholeheartedly, again with the totality heart, fully open, unencumbered space of mind and heart, and very, very directed on considering others more than myself. And that is the basis of your happiness. It's that simple. But we're not trained, we're not habituated enough to have that arising automatically. Let's just take a moment right now. Think about, for this session and all the activities of the remainder of your day, wherever you are in your day, can we somehow merge ourselves and direct our awareness to move ourselves along this path to Buddhahood, to full awakenedness, but for the real purpose, so I can perfectly benefit all living beings, that I can really help everybody happily, wholeheartedly. So if you like that idea, feel free to include that in your motivation, and just take a moment right now to set that intention. And think about Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. These are the three jewels we take refuge in. And some of you have studied the qualities of them. Some of you have been in different level classes about their nature and that are somewhat convinced that the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha are a proper source of refuge for us. They protect us from more suffering. That's really what refuge is about. Safety, protecting us from suffering again. You know, it's where I seek support and shelter. That. So again, it takes some time to understand the qualities of Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, but think about the other things that you do take refuge in that may not be as beneficial, that do not protect you from suffering, that we're just habituated to doing. So think about Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, again, the three jewels of refuge. And think about using that on this path that will help us, that what we're doing is to take care of all beings. We take refuge in them to take care of all beings with that heart of bodhichitta. And so putting these together, let's recite this 4-line, taking refuge and generating bodhichitta that's on our screen right now. We're going to read it once in the English and we'll chant it twice in the phonetics. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. Oh, sorry, we just read that twice in English. Let's do it twice in the phonetics. O Sangye Chodan Zogi Jonam La Janju Badudek Nigab Suchi Dagi Jiningi Peso Namgi Drola Pincher Sangye Drupa Sho Sangye Chodan Zogi Jonam La Janju Badudek Nigab Suchi Dagi Jiningi Peso Namgi Drola Pincher Sangye Drupa Partial. Just some exercises from last week. We started this text that we're reading our way through, and I will bring up some points from that again as a review. We were talking about Lojong practices. Lojong practices. Again, Lo is mind in Tibetan. Zhong, training the mind, training. And so why this is a radical approach, and this is usually intermediate, at least level practices, Lojong. They're not usually beginner practices, is to train the mind. It's a way that our society, our cultures are tend not to be thinking in this way. So it's very radical for us to think about accepting suffering and welcoming suffering is what we've been talking about in the last session. So I asked you to use some of the practices we talked about last week, Lojong practices this week, to transform suffering situations. And so I just want to go back in the text. I'm just as a reminder of what we did. We started to go through some of the points. And again, to remind you, this is the text, Turning Suffering and Happiness into Enlightenment by Jikme Tenpe Nyima. Okay, and he again starts out, and we'll just start with the homage to Arya Avalokiteshvara by the recollection of his qualities which were celebrated thus. So there's always a homage to one of the aspects of the enlightened consciousness, in this case, Chenrezig, the Buddha of, or Avalokiteshvara, the Buddha of infinite compassion. And so what he does is he divides the text up of accepting suffering as the path by means of a relative truth, and then by means of ultimate truth, which we haven't gotten to yet. And then he goes into accepting happiness in the path as a second part, again, by means of relative truth and by means of ultimate truth. So is it the text on the screen? And I've lost the gallery now of people, so I'm just wondering, did we lose our Zoom connection?
No, the text
Oh,
is
here
on
we
the
are.
screen,
Okay.
Amy. Yeah.
Here we are. I've got it now. I've got it now. Sorry, I was in the wrong screen. Great. Wonderful. So I'd like to go, we're going to go down a little bit on the text. And we're going to start. Yeah, I want to start with the A. Just go back up to A, just as a refresher. Okay, so we started, some of the things was suffering as it, can you look at suffering and view suffering as a support of training your mind in the thought that you start to develop renunciation of samsara. Okay? And this is just a quick refresher. B was suffering as a supportive, that it deepens your refuge. And suffering, C is suffering as a support where you start to turn away from some of your negativities, negative mind states, especially arrogance and pride. So I just want to take those three right now. Okay. And I want to ask some of you, those of you that thought about it, sometimes we finish a class and we never thought about it again all week. I really like that if I'm back later in the year, and maybe this is something we do if Shanti Deva Center would like over the winter, like January or February, where I think I may be around next year. Is it? I know it's a long way off, but I used to have classes, like weekly classes, and then in the middle of that week, I sent an email out to people. This we used to do this a lot in California, an email reminder of your homework. So people really liked that because then they were refreshed of what to do. But I just want to ask some of you regarding renunciation, refuge, and possibly transforming. Again, this is about mind training, transforming some of those negative tendencies like arrogance or pride, which is one of the root delusions. Anybody have any experience this week they want to share about something that worked for them based on Lojong practices? Can we get the gallery back up? Thank you. I know people get a little shy, but I thought it could be helpful of,
You can just unmute yourself or
thank
raise your
you,
hand.
Jane.
Thank you.
Hi. It w I thought about it a lot this week. I've been going through a situation through someone that I had trusted for 20 years, and it became a really crazy situation. And I was, I think, and I thought about it, and I thought I'm not going to overreact here. I thought about what you said. Suffering is a chance to grow, and I did that. I did a lot of metta. I did a lot of meditation. I'm not sure what's going on with this person, if it's, I don't know. It's mental or drugs or whatever, but I decided I was not going to. 3 years ago, I would have been flipped out and screaming and yelling and what are you doing to me? But I found some calm. I really, in my heart, do not wish any harm to this person. I want them to heal and be okay. And it just really helped me. And I realize, sometimes I think, is this practice really working for me? But then this week, I really saw that it really is. I mean, I am a different person in how I react to when horrible things happen. And I just want to thank you because I just kept going back and thinking about it and, doing a lot of meditation, a lot of metta for this person. And it just calmed me and made me much, much calmer and much happier.
Great. Thank you. And so I can't get the gallery for some reason. I'm not sure how do I can get everybody on the screen? Is there a way to do that? I
Now
think
you're
you're muted,
muted.
Snehi. Sorry.
Now you're muted.
Yeah, I can't see.
Sorry.
I
I
just
was
get a
saying if you
few
go to
people
the
on.
if you go to the top of your screen where it says view and there's like a little square with many dots and you click on that, it
Yeah,
should
I
give you an
can't.
option to go to gallery. No?
It doesn't. Just six people come up. So I'm trying to see the whole screen. Do you need to unpin me for a second?
Um,
Or do you want to make me, oh, there
yeah.
we go. Got everybody. Wonderful. So I just wanted to say thank you, Jane. So this is the work we have to do. Now, here's the thing. And as we get into also the ultimate truth and also really looking at bringing happiness, this is really how we prepare for death. We don't have time in 3 sessions to go through all of the death practices we do, but hopefully we can do that in a future class We've done that sometimes before, but this is really, for me, the training is Lojong, is just what she's saying. And so some of you I've known for many years now. So that's why I'm looking at the whole group. Some of you I've known for many years. Some of you have been around Dharma, maybe less so. So the thing is, if you're around the Dharma for 3 years, 5 years, and maybe it's just 2 years, but some of you have been longer, please go back a year or two and look at your mind. It's significant. You know, most of you will probably say, yes, I am different and I'm better and I'm less reactive, or I'm at least aware when I'm reacting. And that's very significant. So please rejoice at yourself and your practice that you are changing. The changes just are not sweeping radical things that tomorrow you're all fixed. It doesn't work that way. So we want it that way. We want it fast. But it's not. However, if you look back, some of you have been around 10 years, 15 years, longer. I note changes in you. I've noticed changes from those of you that I know. So I'm sure you're noting changes as well, just like what Jane said. And that's the kind of stuff we have to rejoice at. That's the kind of stuff that really is happening. And that's what's exciting. That's what gets exciting, is it really does work. And right now, the planet is so interesting in a way. I use the word interesting, even though a lot of people use negative words. But I find it's just, we have different phases of the planet. You could go back, and this is not a phase we remember, but we may have lived through it. I just think of times like the plague, the Great Plague of, in, the Dark Ages, they call it, or the Crusades, where there were these massive wars, of religious wars that, so we say things are really bad now, we've had bad periods. We've had bad periods. So what's interesting, though, is your Dharma practice can really deepen during these times. I feel more invested in my practice because the externals are sort of maddening at times, right? It's crazy. So I feel like, but here's the crux is I can change my mind. And that's the only thing I really have control over. Now you may say, but I don't have control over my mind. That's okay. That's what we're working on. That's what Lojong is about, is controlling my mind. And it's controlling your mind in a unique way. So the rest of the planet may not be doing this. And this isn't something I talk about with people that really aren't Dharma practitioners, because they wouldn't understand Lojong. They would say, why do you want suffering? There's so much, but this is a way when you look at the externals right now, and this is where we have to practice is right now, is I can rail about it. And I just spent, the weekend family, and for me, football games are incredibly, duality. And this one, fortunately, was not so violent, but they're often very, very violent, I find, which is why I don't like football. However, but just hearing the conversations of my family, they're not Buddhists, no problem. You don't, but just hearing that kind of concreteness and hearing them talk about politics and the concreteness of the negativity of that external realm and how the blame on different people. But the thing is, Buddhist teaching, it comes from your mind. That's Lama Zopa Rinpoche's main teaching. It comes from our mind. It's not out there to blame someone. So you may say, well, that person's a really strong manifestation of somebody that I'm not comfortable with. Comes from your mind. So I'm not blaming you. I'm not blaming myself, right? But all I can do is work on my mind. And I'm going to make sure that my mind is not off balance and that I'm not easily toppled, thrown over. Why? Because then I can't really help other people. And there's a lot of people that need our help right now. There's a lot of people struggling, as you know. So I'd like to stay as centered and balanced as possible in this. And that's why it doesn't really help me to kind of criticize this person and criticize that person and blame this person externally. And so just what Jane was saying, it's fantastic that you're working with something right there in front of you and going, this is uncomfortable. What can I do about it? Let me apply certain techniques and practices. And yeah, and you notice I'm a little less reactive, and I don't know what's going on for that person. We really can't know unless you have a highly realized mind that is clairvoyant and can read their mind. So I don't know their experience. So what that says to me then is I really want to watch my judgments with others too, and with myself, but I really want to watch those judgments with others because I don't really know what's going on with them. People struggle in their own ways, but what I can continue to do is be as aware as possible, take responsibility for reactions, counter negative reactions before they happen, and just work with my mind, keep my mind balanced, centered. What else happened for any of you? Somebody else had, I think Pat had your hand up. Pat, how are you? Lovely to see you.
Lovely to see you too.
Nice to see some people from our pilgrimages.
Yeah, I know Patty's here too, I think.
Patty, yep, great.
Yeah.
Pilgrimage girls.
Oh my God, we should have t-shirts.
Great idea.
Yeah, so two things really. I mean, it was just so nice to have the reminder to frame your day with refuge that you reminded us last time. And that just, I thought, oh, yes, why am I not doing that? And that was great this week. But then I've also, I've had this kind of irritating knee pain. And I was sort of, mad at myself and mad at my knee and, just the usual very unskillful reactions. And then I thought, well, I can use this now. I can use this. And I did use it for item C, suffering as supportive training and dispelling arrogance.
And you could also use it, so here's the thing, and just looking at our different cubes based on our ages, I hate to break it to all of you, and this is our preparation for death once again, okay? Aging is happening, and there's nothing you can do about it, okay? There's nothing. This is a natural part of life, okay? So for some people, they really rail against it, and there's a denial, and there's resistance, with additional doctor's appointments, pain from arthritis, things you can no longer do, right? So there's one view of how to handle it. I don't like this and I'm miserable. And, because I've just gotten back to the Philadelphia area, I am seeing some friends, and I am at the age where there's a joke with some of us of when we first get together is, do you want to start the conversation with your ailments and what you're going through, or should we just skip that and just go into some other fun stuff? Because everyone I know is having ailments and they want to get into all the details of what the doctor said and the treatments. And it's kind of like, if they want to talk about that, I'm fine to talk about it. And if they need to talk about it, great, no problem. But there's some people I know in chronic pain and you never hear about it. They just go on, and it's not that they're in denial, but there's adaptation. They realize they don't want to be the person that you always show up and they're like, I'm in pain, I'm in pain, I'm in pain. Now, certainly they have certain people they do talk to about it. But this is one of the things, it's a great thing you're working with, Pat, is how do I deal with this? Because it does counter the arrogance, the humility of suddenly I can't walk over there easily, or I don't want to do that trip and walk to that store that's really far because I'm going to be in pain. And you look at that and you go, and then it's like, how can I adapt? Is there a simpler way? And the other thing is we didn't get to D. I think D is, we'll go back to the text in a moment, but D was about seeing it as purification. So continue on. Sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's everything. I mean, impermanence, samsara, the knee is really, very articulate on
Sure,
on,
but you
on
were
the
ace,
whole dharma.
but I want to say you were ace going up the mountain. I mean, Pat just motored. I mean, I'm talking about some big mountains when we went to Laudo. So you were a star, Um, She was
Yeah.
the oldest, if I can say, she was the oldest person in our group, and you didn't really know that.
Oh,
You didn't,
you're
I
very
wasn't aware of
kind.
that. So
I'll
yeah.
never forget the Namche Hill.
Yes, yes. That's right. That's right. Yes, so I think those are fantastic exercises, a fantastic example of how we're managing. I've got knee pain and I've got this pain and I've got, I mean, I've come back and I'm in a new medical system because I'm in a new state. So I've moved back to Pennsylvania from California and I'm in a new medical insurance thing and oh my goodness. So trying to find doctors and trying to get these appointments all done in 2 months, if you can imagine, like a whole, and it's just, I just have to kind of go with the flow and go with like, okay, whatever um, so just kind of letting, just saying it's really great. I don't have any chronic things yet. But it's, again, you have to do some appointments and trying to figure that out. And in the States, as we know, and it's interesting now because most of the healthcare providers I've been meeting, some really nice people, and everyone's been so kind to help, but they all agree. And this is what kind of floors me a little bit is the manifestation that's showing, they all agree that, and I know all of you here do not live in the States because we've got somebody from Australia and some people from other places, but everyone I've met so far in the States, the healthcare providers, they all agree. You ready for this? That the system does not work in the States, but we're all participating in it in a non-working system. And I'm kind of like, my head's a little cocked on that one of like, so why are we putting up with this? Like, why are we accepting this? And because now I'm living part of the year overseas in Europe and not that it's perfect there, it's not. And they do have to pay for healthcare in some of these countries but it's far superior to what we have here. So, I'm always kind of interested in ways we can realistically look at making changes, but it's also interesting to me that the healthcare providers themselves who don't like the system are, it's like, it's a little bit where you, like lemmings, you just go along with, so I think at some point it might reach a critical mass where then people start saying we need to change something. So it's tricky. It's a shame for such a rich country that, yeah, and that makes me a little bit sad. And also just the tangle that I'm in right now of trying to get things sorted and going like, okay, well, won't be able to do that, or we'll have to figure something else out. So, yes. So the humility that comes from that and the lowering my arrogance and, it's quite helpful. And also the other thing that I find helpful in Lojong, what we're talking about in all of this is as you are, for me, moving through waiting rooms and different procedures and I see some people where it's not working for them and they're railing again, like yelling at a healthcare person that they have nothing to do, but it's more like it's a great place to practice kindness. And for me, I just keep rolling that out, even to people in the waiting room. There's always like a smile you can have to somebody, and you see people really struggling with their health. So we can always have kindness. And I've just gotten showered by kindness back from especially the healthcare people and amazed how some of it has been so easy, has gone so easily just when I come into that mind state, that I'm going to choose kindness. So I think that's helpful with Lojong. So thank you, Pat, for keeping on and thank you for the comments of what you guys have been working with. Let's go back to the text right now. And I know some of you may have more things to share as well. We can do that also in the future. And it's nice because we've been reading the text as well. So we're going to pick up after, and I'm just going to go back to, we were in ABC. Yep. And then we have D. If you look at D again, when you're suffering, what Lojong says is it's a support on purifying negative karma. I got the flu, I have knee pain, I have bad arthritis, I have a heart condition, whatever your thing is, again, can you see it as purification? Can you see it as purification? And then if you go to E, which is where the last one we took in, is suffering as a support that I want to practice more virtue. You know, I really want to create, am I creating enough virtue in my life so that less suffering appears? That's the next one. So so let's go to F, which is where we're going to start. Okay. Suffering as a support for training in compassion. Reflect that, like myself, other sentient beings are also tortured by the same or greater suffering. This is a great one. So because I just mentioned, I'm just trying to do these visits, health visits in a couple of months, not easy in the US system. But again, I might be sitting in a waiting room with a routine visit scheduled. It could be some routine test that I'm going through, but there's somebody in that waiting room that has cancer, that they're there because they have cancer, or because they've been treated for cancer, or they're recovering from cancer, or they're recovering from some major event they've had, or a major event that their child sitting next to them is having or has had. And so when you think about that, like look around where you're just not sitting in your own stuff. And so refresh me, the person that first had a comment when we started that mentioned the person they're dealing with that was difficult. Sorry, what was your name?
Jane.
Jane, thank you. So Jane, let's go back to the text for a second. So Jane, when you mentioned even your issue with this person that's difficult, think about people in the world that have many more difficulties with somebody. You know, a neighbor that I know somebody that has a neighbor they've hated for like 20 years now. And the issues it's caused, of the stress it's caused the families, and even damage and harm, like some harm to property and harm to like things like this, or people that work in workplaces for 25 years with somebody that they hate and it's eating them alive. It eats up their stomach and they're completely stressed out, and migraine headaches and whatever else. You know, think about, so there's always somebody that's got it worse than us. There's always somebody. If we can just turn our mind in that, it grows the compassion in your heart. So let the compassion grow as far as our training our mind. And then it says, train yourself to think how good it would be if they were also free from the sufferings. See, we want to be free of suffering, but we don't think about others being free. Okay. So this is really the crux of the Mahayana tradition again. By this means, you will also understand the way of practicing loving kindness, which is the intention to help those who are bereft of happiness. So again, Jane, going back to your difficult person, you know, you could make a little time, 10 minutes a day, right? Or maybe you do it twice a week and think about the four immeasurables, moving that out to them, like thinking, putting the person across and just thinking, may you have happiness and the causes of happiness. You know, and you just imagine light rays coming from your heart, cascading over to them, enveloping them in all that loving energy, because that's what wishing them happiness is, immeasurable love. Okay. And then maybe you have time where you say, you know, may they be free of suffering and all the causes of suffering. Immeasurable number 2, compassion, which is immeasurable compassion. May they be free of suffering and all the causes of suffering. And again, have light rays coming from your heart that, you know, or you can visualize whatever suffering is coming from them, you're taking it in, like using Tonglen to use that, and let it come into you as you breathe, not harming you, harming self-cherishing at your core, any self-cherishing you have. So we can use those things, use it like that to train in compassion, to build your compassion. And you could go on to the other 4 immeasurables, immeasurable joy, immeasurable equanimity. Very, very powerful way to practice. You can try to do that this week. And then G, taking suffering as a support of the meditation that others are more dear than oneself. Again, the crux of the Mahayana tradition, our tradition, the basis of bodhichitta. Okay, the fact that one is not released from suffering is a result of cherishing oneself from beginningless time. So now you should practice thinking that you'll only cherish others, which is the source of your happiness and virtue. Okay, so once again, look at our culture, our system, our world system is very, very much based on holding ourselves as dear, is thinking about ourselves all the time, focused on ourselves. Over and over, we've imprinted our minds, lifetime after lifetime after lifetime. We have a habit of thinking that way. And that's the way a lot of our world is thinking. You know, and it ends up in a very global thing of, I want your country. You know, I mean, there is some things going on in the news that I'm like, it's a good thing I don't have much hair because I would have torn the rest of it out. But there are some news stories going on where to think that now the US is, and sorry to get, you know, a little bit political, but now it's a really good idea for the US to take over Gaza and we're going to manage that. Like, really? Like, is that, you know, so you just see how that cherishing of ourselves is, I want your property, you know, and I'm going to take care of your property for you. You're not managing it well, and I'm going to take it over, you know, and I want your car, and I want your house, and I want your stuff, you know. So we've got pride, we've got greed. I mean, that's what how the war in Ukraine got started. You know, many wars like that. Power, greed, things like that. It's just mistaken view. It's just mistaken view. I have mistaken view in my mind, so I'm going to be seeing it outside of myself as well. Okay? So again, if I can keep using the suffering and support more especially when I do meditation, but if you can spend more time meditating on bodhichitta, okay? And what I mean by that is, please go back. This is critical. And this is so helpful for you. And this will transform your external reality. Go back and get some simple Lamrim books to start with. Or if you're well-versed in Lamrim, go to the bodhicitta sections, okay? Check, there's 2 methods to develop bodhicitta, but if you just want to spend time meditating on the 7-point cause and effect method to develop bodhicitta, okay, that was the one that was openly taught, the 7-point cause and effect method. You'll find it in the bodhicitta teachings, very easily accessible, okay? There's basically 6 points that culminate in bodhicitta. Okay, there's 7 days of the week. Each day, take one of those points and spend 10 or 20 minutes in meditation. So first, learn about the point. What does it mean? How do I meditate on it? Right? You can learn how to do that from some of the Annie Karen's Lamrim outlines, which we can direct you to if you're interested. But spend time with your mind. You can break it down one day or spend a week on one of those points. You know, all beings have been your mother. So that's a harder one to realize, but all beings have been your mother. Understand why that's the case. Okay, think about the kindness of your mother. Spend time soaking your mind in that view, because you start to get this succulence of how precious all living beings are. Incredible preciousness. So whether you're adverse to something you see in the news about someone, okay, but you start cherishing them, realizing at one point or another they've been your mother and they've been enormously kind to you. We have that opportunity, that possibility exists with all beings. Okay, so as a result, it deflects, it reduces my aversion to them, regardless of what I see in the news, what I see somebody doing or thinking or saying. Okay, it reduces any anxiety I have towards them, any resentment I have, any hatred, all of that gets reduced because I see them as incredibly precious. Like that. So that's kind of, you do need to spend some time in meditation to do that. Very, very powerful practice like that. And I mentioned this story before. Some of you know this story. When in 2021, I was able to do 6 weeks retreat here in this house where I'm living, my childhood home. And I was able to do 6 weeks. And what I like to do is, if I don't have to count in a retreat and count mantras and things like that, I really like to do part of the Lamrim and really get more time meditating on Lamrim. So I chose bodhicitta as one topic, spending a lot of time on those meditations. Okay, 6 weeks. And then when I finished, I went to the grocery store, and I ended up in a store that's not well managed, not well stocked. Like, for some reason, I don't know why I ended up there. And I walked into the grocery store. Normally, you can't find anyone to help you. If you do, they're not helpful, right? If there's an item out, they will never want to go in the back and check. If they do go back in the back, they do so resentfully and they never have the item. They never find the item. So this is my experience in the past. But now I come out of my retreat into the store. Same thing's happening as I go to the different areas where I'm buying something and they're often out of the item. But immediately I'd find a employee, which normally I can't find in that store, but immediately I'd find an employee. But because I was more focused on their experience, so when I saw them restocking one of the aisles, instead of me very quickly running over to them and saying, "Excuse me, do you have this item?" I noticed I was more focused on, they look busy. Maybe I'll see when they have a break or something. But immediately when I'd have that thought, then they looked up, and I wasn't even in front of them. Then they looked up, looked over at me and said, "Can I help you?" So I never had that experience in that store before. So this happened with 3 or 4 different employees in different parts of the store. I found an employee right away, mentioned the item once they came over to me, mentioned the item. They went in the back right away to find the item, and they came out with the item. I'd never had that happen in the store before. So this is the way your meditation, your practice, I'm not any great practitioner. I'm not saying I'm anyone special. This can happen to any of you, will affect your external reality because everything's coming from your mind. So these are ways I get more convinced of the Dharma. So what happened is this happened in the store, and I was a little bit not overly focused on the retreat I'd just done, but in the store kind of marveling. And then when I walked out into the parking lot and I was done, I walked out to the parking lot, all of a sudden I remembered what I was focused on in the retreat. And I thought in my mind, this bodhichitta stuff, it really works, right? So it is a way you can affect that you can see some results more quickly. And you do know those kind of things. When you're raising your voice at someone in an office or to get a result, they can get kind of fearful and testy and resentful and angry. But if you're moving kindness out, often you get a kinder response. So again, think about how can we more cherish others more than ourselves, holding others more dear. Okay, so those are some main points. Again, please continue to practice with them this next week. And I'd love to hear more things of what worked for you and see what works. See what works based on these different points like that. So just going on, and it's nice to read this whole text. It is very difficult to practice taking suffering as the path when you actually come face to face with sorrows. Okay, so what do I do when this happens? So it's important, and this is our preparation for death. It's important to become familiar in advance with the practices, okay? With the practice of virtue in particular that we apply to unfavorable circumstances, okay? It's best for you to apply a practice that you have a clear experience of. So when you're dying, what they're saying is, think about when you're dying is what will come up in your mind in your active dying process, or even a little bit before that, before you're actively dying, when you know that you're going to be dying soon, okay, is what's most familiar with you, is what comes up automatically in the mind. So if your mind is very patterned with Lojong, of transforming suffering, that's what you'll feel more comfortable to have at your fingertips there. That's what you'll call up like that. So the point is to practice with it now so that it's familiar to you when you're dying, when we have less control perhaps over our minds, like that. So it's not enough, it goes on to say, it's not enough simply for suffering to become the supportive virtuous practice. You have to realize perfectly that this is what's happened, and certainly obtain a strong and stable continuity of joy, which is brought about by the realization. So again, we also want to have joy in our practice, that it's not drudgery of trying to practice Lojong, because Lojong is hard and we fall flat on our faces. But it's not simply that suffering's the support of the virtuous practice, but I want to realize that and see the result in my mind. I want to see the result in my mind that brings the joy, that this is, so just like what Jane was saying in the beginning, I realize that I am making some progress. So that brings up more joy in my practice to continue to practice in this way, because I am seeing some result as well. And then any time that you practice, what he's talking about here in the text, you should reflect that by the suffering you experience, you're getting great support for the excellent and manifold joys of higher realms, for liberation, nirvana, difficult to obtain, and that in the future it will come about in this way again and again. If I have those imprints in my mind, the tendency is that's what will get accessed again and again in my mind in future lifetimes, future rebirths, like that. So he's saying again, if you practice what I'm saying of these points above, that you will have results in your practice. And we want to have joy in the practice as well. It's really, really important. And Lojong is hard, so, and when we're trying to transform or welcome suffering, you say, well, where's the joy in that? But you actually do gain joy when you see the progress in your mind. Okay. So here it goes on that even if the suffering is severe, it's a supremely agreeable thing. Here he says it's like a sweet nectar, okay, mixed with cardamom and peppers. That's how he's saying welcoming the suffering, because we get to a point in Lojong, and this is again higher level practice, where I actually see the transformation, and that brings me joy. So I'm not as focused on just the suffering being horrible, horrible, horrible all the time. I'm not enmeshed in that, mired in that. And then he says, think about this again and again, gain experience of the bliss of the mind. If this happens, the superabundance of mental bliss will make the suffering of sense faculties, okay, as if it were imperceptible. You won't even notice the suffering anymore. That's what Lojong does. You don't even notice the suffering anymore. So that's really the deeper mind training, when we're really, as again, totally enmeshed in it, merged with it. The criterion for illness to be overcome by patience is that the mind's not able to be harmed by the suffering. Okay. So again, these are people, there's people with chronic pain. I know some people with chronic pain. Okay. But because their habit is they don't want to complain, right? That's their habit. So you don't really know that they're in chronic pain. And they themselves, I do know people that have said this, where they don't really focus on it. Like it's there, but it's not the main thing. Where there's people I know that all they did was complain, and that's all they feel all the time. Yeah, everybody am I communicating? Does it make sense what I'm saying? So just think about what you're focused on. If we're not overly focused, and if I'm again and again finding a bliss and a joy in my mind from practicing, from transforming some of the suffering, right? And even being okay to welcome that suffering, okay? But again, your mind can be more blissful and joyful, okay? And as a result, I don't notice the suffering that much anymore. I noticed something going on for me the past month that I kind of laughed. It was just, very mundane, but sometimes for some reason, I call it travel stomach. Being on the road a long time, it somehow takes a toll on my stomach more than any other part of my body. Everything seems to get stored there. And for the past month or so, I've had on and off nausea. And nausea is a condition, I don't know how those of you feel about it, but I think sometimes I'd rather have a cold than be nauseated. It's really unpleasant, and it can seep in, and you just don't feel like doing anything. You don't want to eat anything, and you just, I'd rather have a bad headache or something. And so I went online just looking at what could be causing it, and I didn't come back from Asia with anything. I'm usually feeling better over there, and it usually happens when I come back to the States somehow. So I noticed this, and it was kind of on and off for about a month. And I looked online, and then one of the remedies, you ready for this? One of the remedies to nausea is distraction. So I went about like ignoring the nausea and just going about my day and getting into something, and it would subside, and then so I wasn't focused on it again. And then, if I kind of less distraction, then suddenly it would come back. And so I think sometimes it's like that with Lojong, with an illness and the suffering, So again, a criteria is for illness to be overcome by patience, because people with chronic pain or serious illness, again, patience is really in Tibetan the ability to bear up under harsh circumstances. So that could be illness, especially grave illness. And again, think about if your mind is not disturbed by it, is not off balance by the illness. Okay, there's your patience. That's how the patience, you overcome it with patience, because your mind is not harmed by the suffering you're experiencing, like that. And this also gives you the clue to overcoming enemies, like that. So what Jane was talking about, the difficult person, there's a way of, making sure that this person is not going to disrupt my day. They're not going to bring me down. I'm going to stay kind and joyful. And I'm just realizing that my mind right now is projecting something a little bit more strenuous, a little bit more challenging for me, and something I might label uncomfortable. But as we went back to the points above, that's samsara's nature, right? So can I use that again in that point above? I think it was letter A, is to grow some more renunciation. This is samsara's nature. That means that nausea is going to show up, difficult people in our lives, knee pain, difficult political regimes or war or your team losing or anything like that. Okay. So, but again, if my mind is free and clear and just being aware of what's happening, okay, without it bringing me down, then, and there's the crux of the Mahayana, then I can focus on seeing others as dear. Yeah. Training my mind, once again, training my mind in this big way. My mind staying bright, spacious, open, okay? And that's how we want to come into the death experience. And if I'm patterning this already in my daily life, making life more meaningful, every moment much more engaged and present with kindness, with bodhichitta, then that's how my death is going to be. That. And he goes on. As mentioned above, reversing the thought of dislike for suffering is the foundation of taking suffering as the path. Because while your mind is disturbed and your courage or interest is extinguished by anxiety, you cannot turn suffering into the path. So again, just saying what I was saying again, if we're very focused on disruption and disturbance, I can't transform the suffering. I can't transform the suffering. And he also mentions reversing the thought of dislike for suffering. Okay, if I can see it and welcome it, I'm already there, because suffering's going to turn up. So if I'm again resistant and disturbed and toppled by it, I'm thrown off my path. But if because I'm welcoming it and it shows up, I'm already prepared. I'm already ready and open and spacious. That. By training and taking suffering as the actual path, you'll also improve your capacity for bliss, okay, as mentioned above, because by actually experiencing the increase of virtuous practice through suffering, you become more and more cheerful, okay? As it is said, if you gradually train yourself through small sufferings, so we also want to start, and this is the best place to start with the small things. Don't take on huge sufferings right away. Your mind's not prepared, it's not ready. So again, we practice with small changes, small disruptions, small inconveniences, okay? Finally, he goes on to say, finally, you'll be able to train yourself in the bigger sufferings. Then I'll be able to take on something bigger. You should act accordingly, for it will be difficult to gain experience through things that are beyond the capacity of your own mind. Like that. So by training and taking sufferings, so you improve your capacity for bliss. So here's the other thing is, if you're trying to develop shine, calm abiding, if we're trying to develop a consistent meditation practice, and part of that practice is calm abiding or shine, okay? There's 9 stages to develop shine, but when you have shine, you have an incredibly blissful state of mind all the time. So think about, if I'm used to taking suffering, which can be in a form that's coming to me externally, that is simply a projection from my mind, something my mind's created in the past, okay? But sometimes it comes in my disruption in my meditation practice. And in Shine, I'm not able to keep focusing on to build that level of single-pointed focus on an object or on a topic of the philosophy or on the nature of the mind itself, okay? So as a result, I'm hampering, creating an impediment to the bliss that my mind could achieve. So again, by taking suffering as the actual path, I can improve my capacity for bliss like that. So again, do think about starting with small sufferings and then move on as you get more skilled in those. And then he goes on to talk about in periods between meditation, breaks from meditation. And he's obviously talking about, teaching to a group of monastics and to teach a group of meditators and things, but this can pertain to all of us. In periods of withdrawal from meditation, pray to the Lama, the three jewels, in order to turn suffering into the path. And when your mind's grown a little stronger, after making offerings to the triple gem and the spirits, you should request them to send unfavorable circumstances in order that you may receive training in the practice of virtue. You should always have the confidence of happiness and cheerfulness. So this particular paragraph I want to point out is, in our general practice, and I know not all of you can do this or are doing it, but for me, for instance, I really recommend some sort of guru yoga practice every day. Guru yoga practice every day. Yoga is yoke. Guru, spiritual teacher or guide or virtuous friend. And I would like to yoke myself to that person, bond and bind myself to that person, merge in a sense with them, metaphorically in a way, right? But as you get into higher level practices, you're really feeling that oneness with the highly realized mind. So especially finding the right teacher. But Guru Yoga practice we can do on very, very simple levels, like a Shakyamuni Buddha practice. There's a little booklet that can take you through that. Some of you are familiar with that. We can do a more intermediate level with a Lama Tsongkhapa Guru Yoga practice. And some of us do Lama Chopa every day, okay? And it can be done, it doesn't have to be a 3 or 5 hour practice. It can be done more quickly. But there's so many practices built in to these practices. So some of you I've taken through the Shakyamuni Buddha practice booklet. Okay, these are booklets that exist on the FPMT shop. They're very easy to access, to download for free or make a donation. They're super easy to go through. And I have some teachings probably connected on my website of explaining the Guru Yoga practice. How do you do the practice booklet? How do you do the Lama Tsongkhapa? The Lama Tsongkhapa Guru Yoga, I have a video of that, of teaching that in Florida to the group. So if you're interested in that, you want to know how do I do it, we can connect you to those links. But I find it, and so this is what they're talking about, is pray to the Lama and the three jewels. You want to, and part of those practices is to make requests. And you can be as specific as you like in your practice. So Lojong is not only, I'm transforming suffering around me, but I'm also asking for additional support. Taking refuge in the three jewels, this is part of the practices, but there are requests, asking them, what do you need? I love to do that every day, to have some sort of, I connect with Lama Zopa Rinpoche every day. He's passed away a year and a half ago. I'm aware of that, but I feel connected on a different level through a Guru Yoga practice. You feel connected to the Buddha. You feel connected to, if Lama Tsongkhapa, if you feel a connection to the patron saint of our tradition, or another teacher you have. It can be any teacher, and you place them in front and think about as if they're really there. And on some level in your practices and your minds, they really are there. We just don't have the karma to see them. We're not pure enough to see them, but they really can be there for us and call up the more familiar we are with calling them up. And so here's an example. I think I mentioned this last week that I like to do is you got through a somewhat endeavor of your day, whether like Jane's situation, this person was difficult, but I did really well with them today, or Pat's knee pain felt a little bit better when I decided not to do the long walk, where I realized I wanted to go there, but I just wasn't going to be able to do it in the cold weather right now. things like that. And so sometimes when I kind of come back, or I just drove a long distance to, I kind of pull up to where I'm going, and I sometimes have a little bit like, thank you, Rinpoche. Thank you for delivering me to this positive state of mind. Thank you for helping and guiding me in all the teachings you've given me. Thank you for your advice that I just watched a piece of that video you gave, and that was exactly what I needed. Or I just read that paragraph in the book that you had written, and it was just what I needed, or whatever book. So see if you can bring them to life a little bit more. So these Guru Yoga practices often have visualizations in front of you, whether it's the Buddha, whether it's a merit field. Use it. They're there all the time. They're very happy to help. And I like to really bring them to life. And that's what's guiding me. That's what's bringing me along, which is incredible buoyant cushion for my practice. So those things can be really helpful, making your mind stronger. Again, and here's another thing, making offerings to the triple gem. Some people have altars that they set up every day, or they set up some water bowls, or they change the flowers and they offer some really beautiful fruit or chocolate, or, and those kind of things all have an effect, a positive effect on your mind, especially if you do it with the right motivation. Okay, we're going to go on. When first training, it's important to keep entertainments at a distance. This is just life guidance, okay? In the midst of entertainments, you may be influenced by many bad friends who say, "How can you bear suffering and contempt? From many worries caused by enemies, relatives, and wealth, your mind will be polluted and disturbed beyond control, so that you will develop bad habits. In addition, the mind may be diverted by various incidental circumstances. In solitary places, these distractions are not present. There, the mind will be very clear, so that it will be easy to concentrate." So I just wanted to mention, most of us live in a worldly setting. You're going to work every day with people that are not Buddhists. Perhaps your family are not Buddhists. The people you live with may not be Buddhist. Your neighbors may not be Buddhists, like that. So again, look at how much you can protect yourselves, which is why Dharma centers are so invaluable. They're so incredible. So if you live near a Dharma center, right, and you have a little bit of a Dharma community there, right, that's how I slowly started to develop friends from those centers. So, and some people will say, well, I have my non-Dharma friends and I have my Dharma friends, and I still have friends like that, from both communities, and people know, what I am, that I'm into Buddhism and I'm a Buddhist nun, and the friends, there have been a few friends that have fallen away that really didn't support what I was doing, right? But the rest of them, they have their own lives, but they're quite happy with what I'm doing. No problem. There's no judgments. There's no criticisms both ways. But again, if you can get a little bit more influence more and more in more of a Dharma scene, more of a Dharma environment, going to the center maybe a little bit more, instead of reaching for mundane TV shows or things that you stream on videos, maybe you make a deal with yourself that this many nights a week I'm doing this Dharma program, or I'm going to finish this Dharma video. I'm going to do this Dharma course and complete it and do the homeworks and read the books they recommended in the notes, so that there's more of an influence of that in your life than the other things in your life. So it doesn't mean you need to do solitary retreat for months if that's not something you can do. But again, trying to create a world around you that makes more sense and supports more virtuous practice, right? Am I communicating? Does that make sense? Be realistic with it, though. I don't cut my family out. I didn't go over to my nephews to watch the football game on Sunday and say, like, well, we can only talk about Dharma here. Like, it's just not realistic. It's not reasonable, right? But I can go and enjoy with them and know that we're talking about a 2 to 3 hour period. I have a little break, but that's not what I'm doing all day long, is watching football games and watching sports and just like that. There's a balance. But it was fun, and it was fun to have a diversion. But just look at what do you distract yourself with? What are your entertainments? Are they healthy? right? Does it help your mind counter delusion, or does it create more duality for you? So think about that. Something we can work on with Lojong. And then again, he goes on, for this reason, when should practitioners do the meditation of controlling sufferings, at first they avoid directing the practice to the harm caused by, this says, by men in places of distraction. Instead, they will mainly practice with apparitions of gods and demons in solitary cemeteries and other wild places. So chud is a specific practice called cutting the ego. Cutting the ego. It's a very specific practice. It's a beautiful practice that people do. And I loved when Lama Zopa Rinpoche's sister, Anila Nawang Samden at Laudo, that I just spent the past summer and autumn with her this past year. And she did practice chud on another part of the mountain when she was young, when she was like 18 to 20, after she had gotten ordained. Her mother allowed her to go to a beautiful monastery, a few days walk from Laudo, called Tupten Chuling. I think it's called Trolshik Rinpoche is the great Lama that was there, and that was her main teacher. So what he did is they camped all across the mountain in little tents, and she told me this story to do this chud practice where you're meditating, you have a larger drum that you're turning, and there's a chant that you do, and the chant is all about cutting the ego. Meditating on emptiness, cutting the ego, it's kind of a higher level practice. You do this chant, and the chant actually sounds very Native American. There's a beautiful recording I heard once of Lama Yeshe doing the chant. And then you have certain implements that you're using. And then what the teacher did at night, she told me, is he would go out, and everything's pitch black, there's no electricity, you're alone in your tent on the side of the mountain with other people alone in their tents. And he would beat on your tent sometimes in the middle of the night where you're practicing. And she said she was so scared. Sherpas don't really sweat the way Western people do, I've noticed. They just don't perspire the way we do, the way white people do, I would say. So she told me that she was so scared. She said to me, water coming, meaning she was dripping in fear. Water coming, like that with her broken English. And so this is what they do, is they would go to a place remotely to do it. And that's what they're talking about, is they would visualize apparitions of gods and demons, meaning they're visualizing these demons. That's what they would work with in these solitary places. Sometimes they'd sit in cemeteries and things like that. So that's all that he's referring to, is how to kind of control the sufferings and how to lessen distraction. That's not something most of us have to worry about like that. And then he goes on to say briefly, not only so that the mind may be unaffected by bad circumstances and suffering, but also in order to extract bliss from the vicissitudes themselves, you should stop the arising of aversion to internal illness and outer enemies, evil spirits, and disharmonious speech, and accustom yourself to the arising of just the feeling of liking. For this, you should cease to view dangerous circumstances as defects and train yourself with every effort to view them as valuable. So once again, he's talking about welcoming suffering. And again, if you've got, what we would work with is internal, if we're afraid of internal illness, things like that. And I've met, like I just mentioned, trying to go through these medical appointments, maybe one of them will turn something up that suddenly, something bigger like that may cause me to cancel the next teaching tour or something. That could happen, could certainly happen. So again, but if I'm working with it, and I've had certain friends say to me, somebody that got cancer, they said, I'm not afraid to die. Just heard them say, so if you're already working with this, knowing death is coming, it's inevitable, these things happen, we have to get something at some point. The standard aging practice in general, your body is wearing out. That's its nature. Just like any inanimate thing that you get, it wears out and it wears down and it breaks eventually. It's the same with our body. Our bodies matter. There's only so long it can continue. Okay, so what he's saying is if you're used to that and you're used to training in that, when the serious illness comes, then you go, okay, yep, You know, I knew that, and it's valuable instead of your being fearful and folding in yourself and freaking out. It's a valuable thing. So whether things, he goes on, whether things are pleasing or not depends on how they're perceived by your mind. So this is about habituating your mind. For example, if a person persistently perceives the faults in worldly enjoyments, then even if his retinue and wealth increase, he'll feel all the more sick of them. Whereas if a person perceives worldly enjoyments as beneficial, he'll aspire to increase his prosperity. So just in general, by this kind of training, okay, think about this. These are the benefits. Your mind becomes flexible. Okay, it has breadth. You have incredible flexibility, spaciousness of your mind. That's what we want. These are the real side effects, the byproducts of Lojong. Okay, you're easy to be with. You're brave. You're courageous. Okay, you're incredibly adaptive. Incredibly adaptive. You're free from obstacles to religious practice. So you can do your practice. You won't have that many obstacles. Whether you want to set up a good retreat setting, whether you want to set up a consistent practice. All bad circumstances arise as noble and fortunate, and I would say virtuous as well. Okay? And the mind will always be satisfied in a blissful state with the bliss of peace. And here it goes on to practice in this dark era. I would say, I'm going to call it degenerate era, I prefer. Degenerate times, that's what they say that this time is. It's a degenerate time. You look externally, you go, well, yeah, kind of looks like that. This isn't a surprise. Again, this is samsara. You must not be without armor of this kind. Think of the armor of Lojong. This is my protection. And when you're not afflicted by anxiety, not only will other sufferings disappear, like weapons dropping from the hands of soldiers, okay, but even illnesses can automatically disappear. The thrust, the hold of the illness on me disappears, okay? And the holy ones of the past, by not having an unhappy mind, by not being discontent about anything, your mind isn't disturbed. When your mind is not disturbed, your wind energies will not be disturbed, in which case other elements of the body will not be disturbed. Because of this, your mind will not be disturbed. So the wheel of happiness will revolve. So here's something on a higher level practice, on a tantric practice, and even completion stage practice. That's what this paragraph that's highlighted is referring to. So we have subtle energies that are moving through our body, subtle wind energies like that, okay? And we have knots and channels and drops and things like that. And what happens is when we suffer from anxiety and negative emotions, all the channels get knotted up and everything gets constricted. And you feel it in energy centers in your body called chakras. Wheel is chakra. Chakra is the Sanskrit term for wheel. And you have one at your crown, one at your throat, heart, navel, sexual organs, and even more subtle ones around your body. So you notice if you have incredible anxiety, you feel it in one of those places. People will tell me about a gripping at the heart. For me, I get it in my stomach. I'll notice it in my stomach, but sometimes the crown, sometimes other places. And that's just those channels constricting. The more at ease I am, the more flexible, the more adaptive, they loosen up. And all the winds flow in the right ways. Eventually, with completion stage practice, once you're properly initiated into Tantra, you can practice completion stage practice. That's the second stage after generation stage practice. After working on that, familiarizing yourself with that. But in completion stage practice, you're going to work with those winds and trying to drive those winds into the central channel so you can actualize higher states of realization. So, Sneh, can you just go down? I want to see how much is left of this section. I don't think there's much more. There's like another page left, something to get to the, and just go down a little bit. Yeah, just go down a little bit further. Great. Okay, so we're almost done. I just want to finish this one section, then I'm going to take questions. I know we're almost out of time. Just go back up a little bit. Yes. We'll gain understanding through sayings like, as birds find it easy to harm horses and donkeys with sores on their backs, evil spirits will easily get a chance to harm those whose nature is fearful. But it will be difficult to harm those whose nature is stable. So with your mind open, aware that death is coming, aware that samsara's nature is it's going to bring suffering to me. How do I want to greet the suffering? And if I make it more welcoming, my mind stays more balanced, more open. As a result, I'm happier. Learned people perceive that all happiness and suffering depend upon the mind, so they search for happiness from the mind itself. The causes of happiness are complete within oneself. They're not dependent upon externals. There's nothing to be hurt by any afflictions from beings or non-beings. The same that one will not be hurt by suffering will be true at the time of dying, when fear and suffering may arise. When you'll always be free, the bodhisattva's samadhi of pervading all elements by happiness is also accomplished by this means. Foolish people run after external objects, thinking thereby to seek for happiness. So this is what we've been also talking about, is blaming everything external, grasping onto everything external. So whatever happiness, great or small, they try to gain, they have many failures, non-attainments, incompletions, misjudgments. People say control is in the hand of others, your hair's tangled in a tree. Okay, and that's the way most of our world system is going. It's somebody else's fault. I hate him, I hate her, she's doing this. So enemies separated from happiness by a little criticism and one state of mind will be unreliable, as when a crow nurses a baby cuckoo. However much it nurtures it, it's impossible for the cuckoo to become a crow. There's nothing that is not tiresome for the gods, miserable for evil spirits, and suffering for oneself. So again, this is about everything comes from the mind. Work on the nature of your mind. Work on transforming the mind to accept the suffering, to be happy with the suffering, to even welcome it at times. I become habituated with that. My mind stays stable and open. This essential advice is the confluence of 100 different points. There are many other ways of acceptance of the suffering of hardships while practicing the path. As taught in this is a certain text they're referring to, but here I'm just writing an easily understandable outline of the acceptance of suffering based on teachings from Master Shantideva and his learned followers. So I want to stop there tonight. Some great fodder. Think about the flexibility of the mind and continue to work on those Lojong exercises, those Lojong examples. Any questions, please? Anything we were discussing this evening? Carlotta? Is it Carlotta?
Yes.
Yeah.
All these teachings, very good, very, I understand now. But how do I reconcile this with the actual reality of suffering that we will see outside? So for the so many examples that we can think of right now of population suffering and being exterminated, how do I reconcile that? Or rather thinking, well, that suffering is part of, I don't know, samsara or whatever, their karma. I mean, how do I go about it?
Yeah, so this is what I find it so valuable now to use it for, because it is a strong time externally, as many people say. So part of it is when you see a situation, and I might just point out Gaza, let's say for one, or Ukraine.
Yeah.
We could just take those two examples. There's many around us. I could say North Philadelphia, is the same, almost like that, in a way. So what happens is, first of all, people get involved. I'm noticing this in opinions. People have strong opinions. Sometimes you're with people that have strong opinions and they start airing their opinions. Okay. And then what I find is a lot of times I've noticed in the opinions, they're not willing to hear another side. So they just want to view their opinion. They need you to hear their opinion. And what I notice about that, and I have some opinions as well, you know, but I'm kind of looking for some answers and want to dialogue with someone. But what I find is some people that mount their opinions out there, it's all about them. It comes from a self-cherishing place. I need you to hear me, and my opinion's important. Okay, so they have their opinion out there, and then I notice how it might come into me, and I'll notice that if I get upset about it, and actually get upset with them and make them other, and I don't like them, and I can't believe they think this way, and I can't believe these world leaders are doing this or thinking this is a solution, I start noticing disturbance in my mind, imbalance in my mind. I'm not happy. So, but if I just realize, okay, I hear the words this person's saying, and I don't agree with them, and I might notice a little disturbance in my mind, but you know what? This is coming from my mind. And I've had strong opinions in the past that I've, marched out there like a big wild horse, not even focused on anybody else in the room, that they didn't want to talk about this, or they have a different opinion. And it comes from my self-cherishing. It comes from a habit. I've done this before, and this is creating this. So there's no point in mine adding to the resentment, hatred, duality, othering them, I'll call it, making them other, because that creates that habit again in my mind. That creates more of this in my mind, more war, more suffering, more hatred, more division. And I firmly believe in Buddhism that that's where it comes from. It comes from each of our own personal experience, because everybody's having a different experience with Gaza right now. And if you say the word Gaza, there's people that think that the Gazans should leave Gaza. There's people that think Gaza should be made its own state and make it a Palestinian state where they can have self-rule and live peacefully. And have equal. There's people that think they should be annihilated. There's people that think that they should continue bombing. There's people that think it needs to be peaceful. So we all have a different opinion. Where does it come from? Not the Gazans. It's got to come from my own mind. So you have to keep layering that on to these atrocities that are external. I'm not blaming myself that I caused it, but I am saying this is a projection of my mind, because everybody has a different view. I mean, I'll put it this way. Putin has a very different view about the Ukrainian war than I have, or about wanting to take Ukraine as his country as part of Russia than I might have, or that you might have. So it's got to come from my mind. So then what I'd like to do is, as gently as possible, is I'm going to engage in my external reality. Now here's the one thing where it can go so far. So I don't know if, Carlotta, if that starts to make sense to you, meaning if I'm talking with other people, I want to be gentle in how I speak with them. I want to make sure I'm listening to them fully without interrupting, right? The external world things, the bigger wars and things, ask yourself what you can do for it, okay? As an individual, I can make a list of what I can do for Ukraine or Gaza. Things like I can give money. If I choose, I can work for an aid association or volunteer for one of those organizations in my own town. I can do that, right? I can go to protests if I choose. If I don't agree with one side, I can go to a protest. If I go to a protest, I want to have a good motivation for going, not hatred, not division, like that. You can choose to make a sign and take to your protest. You get a little bit more visibility, right? I can also choose not to go and not to do those things. I can write letters and call Congress people, call representatives. You feel like it doesn't do anything, but they actually keep a tally of how many calls they get, how many responses they get about every single issue. And that's what they take action on, is which ones get the most responses, like that. I know because I used to work there. So it's often like that. So again, those are the kind of things. And when I'm with my own community and people that are discussing it. I want to make sure I'm listening well, and I want to make sure I'm expressing myself gently, positively, constructively. So which means I might need to read up on certain things so I have the information. And other than that, I want to do my Dharma practice, because that's really going to keep the mind. Like, these are things I make a list of. These are the things you can really choose to do, right? And then the other things I have to let go, right? Does that make sense, Carlotta?
Yeah, thank you.
I mean, that's just the kind of way that I practice with it. And it is a challenging time. And, you might get to a point, I know some people have asked me recently, because some people feel that some of our liberties are changing, and some people have equated this time with perhaps what went on in pre-Nazi Germany. Okay, so there are some things that are looking similar. So you get to a point where you might say, as a Buddhist, we don't really get overly political or take sides or things like that. And then there might be a side where you feel that it's time to speak up. Because some of the things that were going on in pre-Nazi Germany that led to Nazi Germany is people weren't speaking up enough, weren't saying enough of this. And so then you might make it your own personal decision. I need to speak up, or I want to post something on social media, or I want to go to this particular thing. And that's a personal decision like that. We don't want to force people, and you don't want to rail against somebody if they're not choosing your view. But that's I think the best we can do at this point. Does that make sense? Other comments about that? Yeah, Jane?
I just had a question. You mentioned a pamphlet, and we could get a link to get a pamphlet.
Oh, the booklets. So
Yeah.
the booklets are, so there's booklets on the Shakyamuni Buddha practice, and maybe Shanti Deva can send those, can email those to from the FPMT website. So there's a Shakyamuni Buddha practice booklet, or Snehi, I don't know if you can look online and just find the link, and we could post it in the contact. There's also the Lama Tsongkhapa Guru Yoga practice, and this is part of fpmt.org. If you go to the shop, you can download these. It's nice to make an offering to them, but you can download them for free. And those are a couple Guru Yoga practices. I would say the Shakyamuni Buddha practice booklet is a fantastic, if you want to start a daily practice, a great way to get into that practice. And then if you'd like, on my website's connected to a YouTube channel that has a lot of teachings categorized by topic. So if you'd like, what I can do is send to Snehi the link of my explaining the Lama Tsongkhapa Guru Yoga practice. That's a video. I don't have that link right in front of me, but I could send it to Snehi. And Snehi, is that something you could email out to people from this course? Okay, great. And that way you'll have a commentary on how do you do one of those practices. I think there might be both of those on there somehow. Of the Shakyamuni Buddha practice I've explained as well. So maybe those, and if you look on the link of YouTube on my website, then you can look at a whole bunch of courses that may have some explanation of Guru Yoga practices. Yeah, great. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Okay, Jim just posted one of the practices. Great. Let me just see what, I'm going to make sure that's the one that I would. Okay, great. We got the booklets, and we've got.
No one seems to know this, but
Sorry.
Amazon actually has a $50 million fund
me
that
see
they
if
have
I-
to pay
Guru
out
Yoga,
every
Venerable,
single
let me
month.
see.
And here's how you can get a cut of it. My name is Charlotte.
Okay, let me just. Okay, that's the one. Thank you. That's the Lama Tsongkhapa Guru Yoga. Perfect. So that's the link for that, and then the other link that. Okay, let me see, the prayers and practices material. I don't think this is it, Snehi. This is but maybe it is. Okay, it's not actually the link for the booklet I'm thinking of, but let me see if I can. I'm
I
just gonna.
I can send it out to the group, the Shakyamuni Buddha and the Lama Tsongkhapa Guru Yoga from FPMT.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, those are two specific ones, not exactly just the practice materials, but there's those specific
Okay.
ones that are great. Thank you so much. That's wonderful. Great. And she's got some great stuff up here. She's got, or VJ posted 7-point cause and effect. So very, very helpful. Okay, so somebody wrote, I do not know much. I know difficult people in order to help us practice. Yeah, Tenzin Palmo liken us to a piece of rough wood. Our difficult people, they're like sandpaper. There you go. Absolutely. They help sand smooth us out. Yeah, and basically what I would say, we need sandpaper. We don't, okay, great. So another thing related to that, let me just go back, is the sandpaper. Something that just reminded me of is, this is Lama Zopa Rinpoche is, by the way, we need sentient beings we can't become a Buddha without them. Not possible. Buddhas depend, okay? Buddhas come from bodhisattvas. Bodhisattvas are Buddhist saints, very high level being before they are Buddhas. So in order to be a Buddha, you're going to go through in this tradition, you're going to go through the bodhisattva grounds and paths, like their levels. So Buddhas come from bodhisattvas, but bodhisattvas' whole premise of being is to cherish others more than themselves, is to become a Buddha to benefit all living beings, all sentient beings. So they depend on sentient beings. So Buddhas come from sentient beings. You can't get enlightened without sentient beings because they are that sandpaper that polishes that stone of your mind so everything can gleam and shine. So we especially need those difficult people. We especially need those difficult circumstances like that. That's how we perfect our minds. Anything else? Any other last question right now? So I want you to work with that. Think about that. Great questions. So this is very profound, and let it seep in and really spend time. Read the text again. Read it a few times this week. Spend some time on those different letters, A, B, C, D, E, F. Like spend some time. Really spend a day with each of those points going through. Like, what does it mean? What's my refuge like today? What am I taking refuge in? Am I taking refuge in chocolate? Is that really going to help me? Am I taking refuge in streaming this mundane video? Am I taking refuge in yelling at this person? Am I or am I taking refuge in my practice and my meditation and studying this particular text or something? Am I seeing samsara's nature? Am I clear about that? Building some more renunciation. Am I realizing I'm purifying some stuff right now? Is it helping me with humility? Like, go through those points. Very, very helpful. So we have one more session. Next week will be 7:30, and I will be in person at Shantideva. It'll be lovely to see some of you in person. I hope we can meet, and we will also be online. So look forward to seeing you next week. We're going to go to our dedication prayers. And thank you all so much for joining. So let's take whatever merit we may have created, whatever merit we may have generated, whatever positive energy from our time together and studying this very profound part of the philosophy, and let's invest it and dedicate it to our having a deeper understanding of Lojong, being able to effectively train our minds in an appropriate way while we're building a consistent practice. And can we dedicate it to all the beings on the planet who are suffering, for them to be free of their suffering, for all of the long lives of our precious teachers, and particularly for Lama Zopa Rinpoche to come back to us as quickly as possible with the most optimal rebirth, for the long life of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, for the great flourishing and success of all of our centers and projects of the FPMT, particularly Shantideva Center, and for our to reach enlightenment quickly so we can benefit all living beings. Ogewadi nyudu dag lama sanye drugyorne drowa chi kyang Malupa Dei Sala Ruparsho Jangju Senjo Rinpoche Mage Panam Ge Gyurchik Ge Panyam Pame Payong Gone Gondu Belwarsho. The wish-granting, wish-fulfilling jewel, source of every single benefit and happiness in this world, to the incomparably kind Tenzin Gyatso I beseech, may all your holy wishes be spontaneously fulfilled. The swift return prayer for Lama Zopa Rinpoche, peerless teacher and assembly of the children of the victorious one, Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas, victorious Losang father and sons along with the lineage masters, all the objects of refuge of infinite lands, please bestow the virtue and goodness of accomplishing this prayer here and now. Holding and spreading the Muni's precious and complete teachings, through explanation and practice, you wore the armor of patience that is never discouraged. Incomparable Venerable Guru, to you I make requests. While striving single-pointedly for the sake of the victorious one's teachings, the sole gateway through which all benefit and happiness emerge, and from other living beings you suddenly departed to peace, what a great loss. Nevertheless, through the undeceiving truth of the blessings of the ocean of the three jewels, and the great waves of bodhichitta of the children of the victorious ones, may the smile of a reincarnation swiftly beam in glory for fortunate disciples. Thank you so much for joining.